everybody. Welcome back to Unlimited Commander. Today I'm joined, as always, by my lovely co-host, Matt. Matt, how's it going?
Oh, it's going good, man. Just came off of a really good stream, a lot of hardcore magic and people not playing hardcore decks in a hardcore way that makes you want to cry. So I felt pretty good about that. How about you?
I managed to get in a long overdue haircut yesterday, and I will tell you, nobody feels themselves more than straight after a haircut. I walked out of there feeling like $1,000,000. Got my beard all straight, got my hair all cut, got my cut.
Looks
Oh,
good.
I have a cat that's trying to jump on stuff and knock themselves down like an idiot. We're off to a great start here today. But our topic today, we're going to talk about sealed. We've alluded to it a little bit in the last couple episodes about it being one way to play Magic, and I'm sure we're going to tie it to Commander. But why don't you lead us off? Tell me what about sealed? What is it?
Absolutely. I'm super excited about today's because sealed is probably, if it's not my favorite way to play Magic, it is amongst my most favorite ways to play Magic. Just as a recap, in case you haven't been watching for the last few episodes, by the way, hi, welcome to the show, welcome to Magic. We are talking about sealed. Sealed in its main form just means it is a format in which you are given a certain number of packs, usually six. You open all of those packs and you build a deck out of those packs and as many basic lands as you want. So if you do this in a store, somewhere like a pre-release or something like that, they have lands available to you so that you can get those lands. But all of the cards that are in your deck otherwise are out of the packs that you just opened. Some systems do different than other. We'll talk about variants here in a minute, but that's sort of the general idea about it. Sealed uh, is the format of pre-releases. I know that we just finished a weekend where there was a pre-release, and there will be another one coming up soon. So this is a good one to listen to if you have an idea of like wanting to play in a pre-release, because I'm going to talk a little bit about the variants on that. But also, this is the format that the most, in my mind, encompasses deck building over uh, any other skill that you need while you're playing Magic. Like when you're playing Commander, there are certain things you need to know about, like the politics of the board and things like that. When you're drafting, you have to know how to read signals, which we'll talk about in a draft episode at some point. Uh, in constructed, you need to have a certain amount of income or some kind of way of making sure that you have consistency in your deck through four copies of whatever's going on. But sealed is the Puzzle Masters format. It's the one that you will spend the most time in if your whole goal is, I was given a bunch of random stuff. How do I make it work?
Yeah, it's. I will admit that it's probably not like my favorite way. Uh, Not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just that I think it just as we were like getting ready, I said something to the effect of I'm greedy and I want all the good cards. But my experience with sealed is that like every card has it's the one that has the least to do with every other format. A good card in sealed is not going to necessarily be a good card in any other format. And like sure we have like draft commons that if you get enough of them they're good, but like a sealed common is its own monster. And I
Mhm.
just never got a chance to wrap my head around how to determine the good ones. So I'm sure you're going to end up explaining that today.
So the first thing actually is a pre-release itself. So back when I first started playing, that's what a pre-release was. They would give you six packs, generally six packs of the new set. Although back then we had something called blocks for you Gen Z Magic players out there. Magic used to set up its stuff so that every three sets were like an overarching theme. Usually they took place on the same planets. They had the same mechanics spread out with a couple of new things interspersed as the block went along. but it was mostly the same like mechanics and theme and representation within a block. So you would either get 6 packs of the thing or 6 packs consisting of stuff from the block. So a Theros one would have been, I believe it was 2 Theros, 2 Born of the Gods, and 2 Journey into Nyx by the end.
Couldn't tell you.
Yeah,
I can't
I
remember
believe
that
that's
far
right.
back.
It might have been 3-1-2 because of how bad the second set was in the Theros block. But besides that, so like they'll give you something like that. In common pre-releases now, you might note that they give you a pack that they call a seeded pack. So they give you 5 packs and then they give you an additional pack. I believe it's 5 packs in an additional pack. It might be 6 packs in an additional.
In certain ones, like
Yeah,
Strixhaven was like that because it depended on which school you picked. Any of the
exactly.
Ravnica ones was dependent on the guild you
On the
aligned
guild that
with.
you got, et cetera, et cetera.
There was another one recently that was like that too.
Yeah.
I think that actually it was Brothers War was the most recent one because then you got one either
It
flavored
was
to
like Mishra
Urza or
Urza.
Mishra. Yeah.
Yeah. And so a seeded pack is exactly, I mean, it's not exactly what it sounds like, but a seeded pack is a pack that is themed along a line. So rather than it being completely random cards, it is somewhat randomized, but generally is pushed towards a particular theme. So back when it was Ravnica and it was guilds, if you picked up the black white guild, you would get a pack that had at least a majority of black white cards to try to help you into that build. So that way, if you wanted to play that group, you could play that group in theory. And that is sort of how pre releases tend to go in general now. There's also the two-headed giant variant. Two-headed giant can be played in any format, but the idea is that it's 2 people versus 2 people. You have a shared life total that's a little higher than normal, and your fields and your graveyards are considered joined. Your turns take place on the same turn. So you have the ability to uh, attack together as a team, block together as a team, and it's a whole extra can of worms, which I'd like to go into real deep detail about later. But sealed is a good format for this because at the stores that I used to play at before the pre-release packs, you would get 8 packs between you, but you would be able to use from each other's packs. So it meant that you could build 2 decks that were much better than you would normally play in a sealed event because you had access to a bigger card pool.
So
But then you,
I will admit that I knew about the packs being joined. I did not know about Graveyard. That is interesting.
yeah, it's like it's not that your graveyard. I guess your graveyard is your own. You still have to target your opponent, your friend if you want to use your friend's graveyard. But like, yeah, there's a lot of little nuances in Two-Headed Giant that unfortunately I haven't gotten to play Two-Headed Giant in quite a while. I think the last time I played it was, gosh, probably maybe New Phyrexia, maybe a little later than that. Oh,
That was a while ago.
no, it would have been Khan's Block, so probably Dragons of Tarkir or something like that.
Something like that.
I loved Two-Headed Giant. Two-Headed Giant was my favorite way to play during that time period, and I would grab a random friend, someone who I knew played Magic, and just be like, okay, let's go. I'll build our decks. I'll pay for things. I'll build our decks. All you have to do is do what I tell you to do, and we'll win. Because even someone who didn't know how to play Magic could come with me, and we could go, 3-1 or something like that. Because you're allowed to confer. So I'd be like, all right, put this down, then turn it sideways, and then put this down. And my opponents would just be like, has this person ever played Magic in your life? And I'm like, how about you pay attention to your own hand, huh?
Nobody asked you.
We're busy. And then we have things like Sealed League. We've talked a little bit about League a bit, but a League is essentially an extended format thing where in a draft league, you would draft a deck, and then a couple weeks later, or a week later, you go back in. You keep the same deck, but you get some more packs, and then you can add to it or do something like that.
This one's one I actually have a lot of experience with. It's funny that you looped it in here because I didn't consider it the same. Just
That's
because
right.
like sealed is considered to be the format of just like the six packs or whatever you want to talk about it.
Hmm.
But this one I actually had a lot of experience with because as we've talked about, I also used to work at an LGS, as did you. But this was one thing that not only did I organize as an employee, but then ended up continuing to organize after I like moved cities and tried to make new Magic friends. So a sealed league is something where you start out with as Matt stated, either like a draft or we would start ours with a like a pre-release, right? Like a sealed six packs and do that whole thing. But then going forward over the course of a few weeks, you would have different ways to add into your pool to expand it. So we would do something along the lines of two packs every week that you could purchase to add to your pool, flesh it out. And if you want to have a real good amount of fun with it, you change the theme of every week. So your first week, you might have the sealed. And then the second week, you might have a draft and build a nice, decent sized pool. And then the week after that, you might say it needs to be two colored, build a 60 card deck. And then you might, the next week after that, say, okay, now you can add two more packs and we want to see a three color deck. And you start building up on your pool over the course of many weeks. This ends up making it nice and level because everybody's still opening packs and getting all that fun, but you're still working off of a limited set of cards in apparently what is a sealed pool, just really big.
Yeah. And that's one of the beauties of sealed is that a lot of people hear sealed and they think of the solid definition, but you're really just talking about a sealed pool, a pool that is finite by definitions of whatever's going on and keeps everybody having to build in a more interesting way. My personal favorite sealed league that I did was back in Innistrad Block, because Innistrad Block was the first block constructed format for pros. So when you were playing in the pro tour for Avacyn Restored, it was block constructed. So you could only use things from Innistrad, Dark Ascension, and Avacyn Restored. And so we started learning that through the draft league that I was playing in. So originally, or the sealed league. So originally it was sealed to Innistrad, to Dark Ascension, to Avacyn Restored. And then each week you could choose which two packs you added from those three sets. So some people leaned really hard into the new stuff, trying to get things that had Soulbond and all these other effects. Some people went really hard into Innistrad, trying to get like the graveyard effects that were really good in that set, and some of the cards that really really solidified whatever your tribal theme was, whether it be vampires or werewolves or whatever. And some people went for Dark Ascension because they really wanted Liliana the Veil. Like, just the way to go. That sealed league taught me a lot about how to play sealed in the future. So I ended up playing a lot of sealed, and my grand achievement in sealed is I took a top 8 at a GPT in sealed during Avacyn Restored. So how do you evaluate cards in this thing? And so I figured I'd talk a little bit about my Avacyn Restored situation. So for Avacyn Restored, this tournament, first off, was the scariest thing that I've ever done as far as like a playing at a professional level. It was the first time that I'd gone to an event that wasn't like hosted at my local stores or at something else like that. It was like at a big convention center with hundreds of players all coming in to do the same thing. And I was pulling my seal pool, and it was garbage. I had nothing good. And I'm writing down all these cards, and I'm just like, this is going to be miserable. I can't even build a deck. I don't know what's good and what's not. And then they were like, okay, now that all the cards are written down, I want you guys to wrap up the cards in your piece of paper, put a band around it to keep it nice in place, pass it to the left. Now pass it to the left again. Now pass it across from the person from you. Now pass it to the right. Now pass it across from you. Pass it to the right. And you ended up with an entirely different seal pool. And
Hmm.
it was so good that that happened for me. Whoever pulled my pool, thank you. It was much better than the pool that I handed off to whoever got my terrible pool. But
That's the thing I think that I dislike the most about sealed, if I'm being honest, is that like it's very dependent on what you open. There's no way to fix what you've done.
it's it's very true. And now that I'm like more experienced than I was, I can look back at that pool that I had and go, there was something I could have done. There was a 3 color deck in there that I could have seen that I didn't see at the time, or whatever. But especially when you have not gotten to play a lot of sealed, or you haven't really like learned how to evaluate cards, and the way sets are built now, especially with a lot more like bomb heavy sets and more sets more dependent on the rares and the mythics that you tend to get. It's like it can be daunting for sure. Like
Yeah.
it can even get frustrating, especially like Theros Beyond Death sealed was awful because it's like, did you get the Dream Trawler or didn't you? Because if you did, you're in blue white and you won. Congratulations.
Mhm.
You're in blue white or you're in blue white X, and then as long as you get Dream Trawler on the board, you're good. And if you didn't, hopefully you don't play the person who did.
Yeah.
And that's a super annoying thing. But besides just kind of looking at the rares, you'll find that your colors will often be dictated by what you have the most of rather than the individual power of each card. So I can tell you at least 4 of the rares that I got out of my seal pool. One of the cards that I got was Kessid Cage Breakers, which is a 3/4 for 5 mana. I know to new players that doesn't sound very good. 5 mana for a 3/4. Whenever it attacks, put a 2/2 wolf creature token onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking for each creature card in your graveyard. Now, there were some decent okay builds with this in constructed, but a 3/4 for 5 even at the time was pretty low. But in sealed, this is insane because you do a lot more trading in sealed. There's a lot more of that. Yeah, I'll block that just so that it can't beat my face anymore. You pile up a lot of creatures in a graveyard in a sealed match, and this completely exploits it. I left this out of my original build when I started playing the thing, and a friend of mine came up to me, looked through my extras, and was like, "What are you doing? Why is this not in the green black deck that you built? Like, why is this not here?" And I'm just like, I don't know. 3/4 didn't just seem that good to me. He's like, "Read the card again." And that's the main. If I can give you any tip when it comes to sealed, read the card again. Read it 2 or 3 times. Give yourself a chance to really soak in what a card does, because you never know what kind of 1/4 garbage that you would never play in a commander deck is going to be good when these are the only cards you have. Because you got to assume whatever you have, your opponents have equal garbage or less. So work with it. make
Mhm.
make those things work. I also got 2 or 3 spider spawnings. Those were uncommons that were sorcery. Create a 1/2 green spider creature token with reach for each creature in your graveyard and had flashback for 6 and a black. That meant that you get a bunch of spiders out for doing what you were already going to do, which is block. So yeah, those were pretty good. And then from the Avacyn Sword stuff, I got Wolfir Silverheart, which is a 6 man or 5 mana 4/4 with Soul Bond, which means that you can, when it comes out, or if it's not bound when it's out already, and something else comes out, you can bind it to something. The two things, when they're paired, when they call it, in this case, they each get +4/+4. So it turns this into a 5 mana 8/8, and it turns whatever it's bound to into something +4/+4. So
The worst thing you could bind it to becomes a 4/5.
Exactly. So good. And then the last one that I remember from the pool, particularly, is Silverblade Paladin. One a white and a white.
Oh, love that guy.
Yeah, one a white and a white for a 2/2. As long as it's paired to something, both creatures have double strike. So we were just talking about the Soulbind from Wolfir Silverheart. If you bound the Paladin and the Silverheart, you end up with an 8/8 and a 6/6 that both have double strike. So it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
That's all right.
So at that point, I was experimenting with this particular tip that I'm about to give you, and now it's just sort of my go-to, especially when you're playing in paper sealed events. Build 2 decks, because what I did was I built one deck that was green black because spider spawning is green black. I had not very many good black cards, and my green was sort of limited. But I did have that Kesset Cagebreakers. I had that Wolfir Silverheart. I had a bunch of other like graveyard focused stuff. So some self mill things. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna build a green black deck for sure. But I have this Silverblade Paladin, and it's really good. The thing that you might think you would do is maybe splash a third color, get in white just to get the Silverblade in. But I wanted my deck to be more consistent than that. So I built a second deck that was a red-white deck, because I think one of the other cards that I got out of that pool was Bonfire of the Damned, the red miracle board wipe that deals a bunch of damage to player and creature, I think. Definitely creature. And if you flip it off top of your deck, it costs way less. So I had that deck put aside, and that was my secondary deck, my Boros, like Soulbind, Double Strike, First Strike, just try to hit things off of the board. And then my main deck was the green black creature deck that ended up getting Kesset Cagebreakers in there after my buddy busted me on it. And that deck took me almost entirely through the tournament without having to switch. Now, people might ask, why build 2 decks if you're only going to play one? The reason is that when you're playing sealed, your options always look very vast because your card pool is the same on both sides, right? Like it's like you almost get an equal number of every card. If they built a set right, when you open a full box of packs, you're going to get roughly the same percentage of green as you do to white, as you do to blue, as you do to red, as you do to green. You're not going to usually have a box where it's just like, I got 3 times as many green cards as I did anything else. It's just not the way that it tends to work. And since they have to make these packs so that they can be draftable, it especially doesn't work that way. And you end up in a format where you get pretty cleanly across the board. You might get, 14 black cards, 12 green cards, and things like that. So when you're first looking at your pool, it's going to look really, really intimidating because it's like, well, do I splash a third color just to get these 2 good cards in, or do whatever? So what I'll do is I'll build one deck first, and those will always be either the things that work really well together, like the green-black graveyard deck, or in that particular case, or red-white was an aggro deck in that particular case, or the 2 that I have the most cards to choose from. So if I ended up in a weird one where it was like, okay, I did have 20 green cards and 17 blue cards, I'm going to build a green-blue deck so that I have more choices for my main deck. And then look at the colors you have left and see what you can build. And that deck might not get touched, but one thing it does is it gets you prepared to look and evaluate cards better because it gets you in the mindset of having an even more strict pool and going, okay, what do I do when I don't have good cards? I got to try these. I got to see what they do. I have to find out how they work in this format. And that will make you better at sealed in general. And if you happen to play your second deck during a tournament match, you have no idea how much it messes up your opponent when you go, okay, sideboard time, pull up a whole new deck that's already sleeved and start shuffling. It completely throws people off of their game because any sideboarding they were going to do to you to match whatever you did in that last game is completely gone because you're playing an entirely new deck with an entirely new strategy. And it makes it so that they cannot prepare for what you're doing now.
It's funny you bring up sideboards because now we're going to completely forget about sideboards for the rest of the conversation because we're going to try and tie this into how it relates to Commander. Where we,
Absolutely.
in fact, do not have a sideboard, period. Does not exist.
It's true. You do not have a sideboard and it does not exist. So we talked a little bit about Boxmander on a previous episode. And I said that I would come back to it. And Boxmander is sealed. It's just like a regular sealed event, with the variation being instead of 6 packs, you're getting 36 packs. You're getting a whole box. Could be 24 packs, I guess, if you're playing is it 24 packs in a set booster box?
No, but set boosters aren't good to do it with. We're gonna
They're not good. I wouldn't suggest
asterisk,
it.
don't do this with a set booster box.
Right. You technically can. We suggest you don't.
Yeah.
Which we can get into more detail about here in a minute.
I will say that like some of the specialty sets were at the like 24 pack range because if you were doing something like Conspiracy, that was a 24 pack box because there was no prizing packs. That's why they do a 36 because if you take 3, like it's all supposed to be for a draft, right? So if you have 8 people in your draft, which is a common pod, each one gets 3 packs. That's 24 packs, and then the box itself was designed to give prizing packs to the top 3 places. So you would have those extra 12 packs, and then you'd give like 4, 4, and 4, or 6, 3, and 3 to, or whatever arrangement you wanted to do. So if you're going to do Boxmander off of one of the supplementary sets, then you're going to end up short changing yourself. This is mostly from the perspective of using your average expansion set draft box. Expansion set being anything that's been put into standard.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. So like, yeah, that's the general idea. But yeah, for Boxmander, you're probably going to want to use a draft box if you can. But it is sealed. You're still working off of a very limited set of cards. And in some ways, it has even more of that puzzle maker's issue because we tend to play Boxmander the exact same way, which is only one copy of every card. Just because you got more copies of a decent draft uncommon doesn't mean you get to use it in Boxmander. And you have to make sure that you're still playing within color identity. Now, the newer sets are more geared toward letting Boxmander happen because newer sets have a lot more legendaries in them. And that means that hitting a color identity with a legendary is pretty easy. It's a lot harder to play Boxmander in Innistrad than it is in Midnight Hunt as a thought. Even though you might get a much better deck out of an Innistrad deck if you can manage to pull it off. The thing that is really cool about that is that if you already like sealed, if the things that I've been talking about apply to you or they entice you and they want you to do sealed, that Boxmander is that just cranked up to 11 because you've got to do a lot more cards, a lot more evaluation, a lot more puzzle building. But it's expensive. It's buying a box to do this is expensive. And unless you've got a really cool friend group and you all have a lot of excess cash, it's going to be something that is going to take a toll on you if you try to do it all the time. Now, we've talked about solutions to this in the past, and so I'm not going to go over the solutions, but I do want to talk about another solution, or rather a situation in which Boxmander works out a lot better. If you are the kind of person who already buys 3 or 4 box of a set because you want the cards from it, if you're that kind of person, I don't suggest that. I suggest if you're a constructed player to buy singles. But if you are that kind of person and you just like cracking boxes or whatever, then you could set up a little Boxmander pod and just let everyone use your cards, make sure that they sleep up what you're doing, and make sure they return everything at the end of the day. And then you can have that fun setup without doing it. I opened a case of Magic once with some buddies of mine because I was getting back into the thing and I just wanted some tradables, sitting around to do stuff. And I was already buying a case. I was already in for it. So we did a pseudo Boxmander thing in that set just over at the house. It was like everybody pick up a box, we're all opening a box, and then we'll just play. We'll just try to build something and play. And it was the most amazingly jank version of Commander that I've ever seen in my life. People playing just the weirdest stuff. Someone in that group, I think, got a Mind Sculptor, and they were trying to actually use the ultimate to kill someone during a game of Commander. It was it was so bizarre to see all of these weirdly high powered cards outside of their comfort zone and showing that you we talk about evaluating cards and saying that a bad card can actually be very good in sealed. A good card can also be very bad in sealed, because if you don't have the consistency of being able to get it into your hand and onto the field and do whatever it is you need to do with it, the power level of a lot of that stuff goes way down. If you are looking to save money, though, or if you want a similar experience to Boxmander, you could also do a Commander Sealed League. Now, this is some.
Before we get into that, I will say that if you're a little caveat, and you can hit us up in some comments down below or hit us up on social media, but we have come up with some creative ways to do a Boxmander without having to buy the actual box. It's not a perfect system, but we do know let's put it this way. If you are creative, you can find the way. It is doable. It's not the easiest way, but it is possible to do it. Sorry, you were saying Commander.
No, you're fine. Commander, yeah, no, absolutely. I think that that's a very important thing too. If you want to try this, there are ways to do it without getting too deep into it. Just think about it a little bit. You'll get clever. But Commander Sealed League. So Commander Sealed League, I actually came up with today. But it is a similar thing that is combining what we were talking about with Sealed League with the idea of playing it in Commander. So this is my thought. Everybody gets a pre-con and a few packs of some set. Hopefully we're talking about a set that fits with the theme of whatever Commander pre-con they got. So if you got them the Welt Held pre-con, probably give them some packs of Midnight Hunts or Crimson Vow or something like that. Then you can take your pre-con and augment said pre-con with the couple of packs that you got. You might end up adding a color. You might be able to change commanders depending on what set you're dealing with and what you're building. And also, obviously, give people access to basic lands so that if they do add a color or take away a color, they have access to enough lands to fix things. And then the next week, add 3 more packs into the mix and make it so that they can augment even further. And each time, they can choose what they're adding and just make sure that they are coming toward a cohesive, cool looking setup, which is very similar to the Boxmander feel because you're still limited by what's going on. It is a lot less expensive because precons are generally easier to get a hold of, and buying 10 packs as opposed to buying a full box is pretty pretty easy to deal with. So it's give you a similar amount of time and prep on it, but it will be more on rails because you will be sort of in whatever colors your precon is. Like there's a chance you might be able to augment it, but you will likely still be kind of in that
I would
idea.
say that it's not even the colors that you would be stuck with. It's mostly the theme,
Mhm.
because I mean, you could add another. Oh, I don't know. Let's take, like you said, the will help precon. So you end up in uh like blue black zombies. So let's just say you go back and you pick up some Amonkhet and you end up with some white, and then you find someone to give you an Esper deck, but it's still gonna be zombies because that's where the zombies were, and like all the other things that are in there, like Wilhelt, for example, the rooftop storm that's in there has literally nothing to do with anything but zombies.
Mhm.
So if you start looking at these from the pre-con perspective, then you're going to probably start picking packs that tailor to what you're trying to morph the deck into,
Mhm.
because it's always still probably going to be the theme that it came with. You know, what, how much would you have to change the Faldorn Exit from Exile deck to make it not be about exiling cards?
Exactly. And in a way, I think that that is in itself a good skill that will make you better at sealed and then make sealed more enjoyable for you in the long run. Because sealed depends on that same thing too. I had mentioned already when I build two decks, one of the decks is either what I have the most color in or what things fit together the best. Like what two colors have a theme that jives, right? So while Boxmander might push you a little bit more towards color, this would push you a little bit more towards theming.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives you an idea of sort of balancing out the ideas of what works best for you when you're building a deck in sealed, checking color versus theme and how to strengthen either one so that you can be better at the regular version of sealed while still having fun and doing this cool commander thing that you don't normally do.
I would also say that, like, if you were to try something like a box mander, and this just occurred to me, this isn't in any notes or anything like that,
Yeah.
but much the way that we talked about in last episode about how if you're going to try and draft for commander, pick a drafting commander set. Uh, a nice way to get a feel for if this is something that you would enjoy is try the commander sets as a box. Open up a box of like Battle for Baldur's Gate and see what you can come up with in there, because it's going to have a lot of stuff that's specifically tailored. It's still going to have your color selection, but with things like the backgrounds, you know, you're going to have a lot of flexibility to make something work. If you went back to the previous Commander Legends, just Commander Legends, it's actually its whole name. I don't know why they went with like we everybody's the running gag, but so if you go to the original Commander Legends set and you pick up a box of that and you try, you're going to have all of the partner commanders, and you're going to be able to flesh something out like that. So it may not be as interesting a puzzle, but it's definitely going to give you a feel for whether or not it's something you would actually enjoy.
Mhm.
Because the asterisk to everything that we're going to talk about, especially in like these opening episodes where we're kind of like giving a history and relating each of these different formats to Commander where they normally wouldn't, is that they're all going to be something that you may or may not enjoy. If you're a typical Commander player who just likes coming up with really interesting builds and having, pardon the noise in the background, the cat is scratching something. There we go. So if you're you know, usually the kind of person who enjoys building something with like a very specific theme in mind and having the joy come from putting a story together in your deck, or having a very strong theme and not putting cards in that don't fit your theme as much as they fit, whether, and the theme being a very broad statement, whether it be like your archetype or like, you know, ladies looking left as a common one. So anything like this that probably isn't going to tickle your itch, honestly, because you're trying to puzzle out a deck out of a set number of things. But if you like trying to come up with new and interesting ways to clash cards together, these are probably going to be it. So try it in a way that you can experience it in its fullest without really hindering with yourself by the inevitable things that we've been talking about with sealed in general, but just the way that any of this goes of not having access to everything that you may want. Give it a go in like what is it? What is I call my cube is easy mode. Try
Hmm.
this out in easy mode first and then see. Just like playing a video game. You go onto a video game, it's choose your difficulty and it's like beginner, normal, and hard. Most people will play it in normal if they're like used to games, but you can try easy mode and see if that works for you.
Absolutely. And I think there's one more thing that we were talking about when we talked about sealed. A lot of meta talking there. We talked about arena and playing sealed on arena. And one of the things that I mentioned was that arena does not give the same sealed experience as paper sealed gives due to the inherent nature of how arena is. I would say though, if you are interested in sealed and you want to get some practice in, it's better than nothing. And it's actually like it's still sealed. It's still fun and it still gets you into that mode of like looking at cards and trying to figure out what cards go where. But like use it as sort of a platform to get an idea behind it, and then just go do some sealeds over at your local if you can, because doing it in paper is a more enriching experience. Quick note on that: the reason why Arena isn't good at it is because Arena does not allow you the ability to build a second deck in any meaningful way. So it's a lot harder to sideboard and figure out how sideboarding works on the Arena client, because if you wanted to build a second deck, you'd have to like add lands into your pool that would fit the second deck, because Arena just doesn't allow for it. If it's not considered in your pool, it won't let you do it. And then in between games, you have to hastily click every card out of a deck and then put in every card you want to put in the deck. Make sure it's back up to 40 cards at least, and get going on the thing. It's a pain. So
Mm-hmm.
save yourself that headache and just don't don't do it. But when you are playing sealed on arena, just remember the things that we talked about and think about how this can be upshifted for you and your friends into the commander setting. It doesn't even need to be 100 cards. You could do a sealed singleton commander-esque type thing and make it only 50 cards, and then make sure that everybody buys, 7 or 8 packs. That way everybody's sort of on board for the same amount of play style. As long as all you and your friends agree on what is allowed and not allowed at whatever sealed
Mm-hmm.
event you do, you will always have a good time, because in the end, you're drinking beer and eating tapas.
Mm-hmm. And it's, I mean, Rule Zero goes through all of this. I mean, when you're doing something like building out of a specific box, that's also a Rule Zero. Hey, just so you know, we're all going to build out of this box. That's our Rule Zero.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't want to limit yourself to singleton because you opened all these cards and like you can have yourself, because if you're going to build 100 cards, what's the chances you're going to find both of your tapped common lands in your colors?
Mm-hmm.
You're probably going to draw one. Like play around with it, see how you feel. I personally, and we haven't discussed this at all. It's the first time, and I'm going to disagree with Matt, and it's okay because we're friends. But I think that if you're going to open a whole box, the singleton is actually not that important because you're going to be playing with a bunch of junk anyway.
I think that that's fair, actually, and I like to keep a singleton because I like to sit like as close to the format that I'm trying to mimic as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But I would agree, in general, like you could probably get away with playing multiples. You probably want to like make some clear rules about it when you first do it,
Mm-hmm.
because saying that you can take it out of singleton is fine, but then if someone in your group manages to pull 5 copies of a card that's an uncommon that is actually a really good thing in a sealed format, and being able to have those 5 copies in their deck might be a little unwieldy. So maybe you'll say instead of one, two, or whatever
Yeah.
you particularly agree on. But I do think that that also makes things interesting, and it's just another augmentation again of that variant that allows you to have fun with what you're doing.
Fun fact, none of these things, to the exception of actual sealed, like we were talking about at the very beginning with, say, a pre release, None of these are actual formats that Wizards endorses. And so they're all kitchen table Magic, and you can do what you want. So we're just giving you options to try out to see if it's something that you enjoy. Build it however you want. If you want to open just like one box and then you all like take the color you want out of it, or so, I don't know. Now we're just brainstorming, and that doesn't help anybody right
That's what I love. And actually, so it's really funny. This is something that you're going to hear me say more as the podcast continues. But what Adam just said, to extend on sort of that, every variant is kitchen table Magic and you can do what you want. Come here and listen closely, okay? The whole reason that Magic continues to exist to this day is because you can do what you want. You and your friends have all the power at almost every single thing that you go to do what you want when it comes to the way that you engage with this game. They gave you a platform. They gave you some ideas. They've given you a general rule set that you can turn to when you're confused. But the whole reason that Commander exists in the first place is because a bunch of judges were bored between D&D things, and they wanted to do something that was, complicated. They wanted to try something that would scratch their judge's itch while still being entertained and amongst friends having fun. The whole reason, yeah. So
Magic itself is only made as a game to play between D&D sessions.
Exactly. This is the thing about what makes this game so good for everyone involved, is being able to take it and make it your own. As long as you and your friends agree on what the rules are, have at it. Go ham. I want to see people in the chat telling me, if you are watching this, you're in our comment section, put down a comment of a time that you guys played a format that you had not experienced before.
So like Matt said, try all this stuff out, see what you like. Hit us up in the socials and in the comments below. Tell us what worked for you. But as usual, gang, thanks for hanging out with us. This has been a wonderful time. Matt, thanks again.
Always.
And we will see you next time on Unlimited Commander. If you liked what we had to say, consider supporting us on Patreon. Your support goes directly to growing and improving the show.
You can also like, follow, and subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Make sure to comment or leave a review. The cast can also be found on Twitter at Unlimited Commander.
You can find Matt's Twitch, Twitter, and other YouTube projects at knowledgepoolmtg.com.
And Adam can be found on Twitch and Twitter at Adamus_Prime86.
Our theme song is Polaroid by Harris Heller, licensed by Creative Commons.